From Charles onto the newspapers now. Solange is joining us here, and so she's starting off with the latest from Turkey, the massive earthquake there. You've been looking through it all for us, haven't you, Solange?
Yeah, this is a live story. It's a developing story. But we are getting live feeds that describe what life must be like on the ground right now in Turkey and in Syria. We are living a disaster, writes the Turkish paper Cumhuriyet. It describes hundreds of dead, and extensive damage to destroyed buildings and hospitals and monuments as well. Now, the Daily Sabah, which is the English language Turkish site, it explains that rescue teams from Istanbul, other Turkish cities, as well as other nations, are being dispatched to the southeastern area of Turkey, as well as to Syria, to help search for survivors that may be stuck under rubble. It is a vast area. The site says the quake was so strong it was felt in Lebanon and even as far as Egypt.
Yeah, we'll continue to follow that, of course, here on France 24. We're going to turn to the US shooting down now of the Chinese spy balloon this weekend. Solange is going to tell us how the Chinese press is reacting to the incident.
Yeah, for the Global Times, the shooting down of the balloon off the U.S. coast sets, it says, a bad precedent. The government-backed paper claims that it was, quote, a non-threatening airship for civilian use. And all of this, it says in another article, is sensational hype and proof that the U.S. has, according to it, ulterior motives, namely a lack of sincerity in regard to improving relations. Now, for the Global Times cartoonist, this is the work of anti-China politicians, referring here to the balloon not as a civilian tool, but a meteorological balloon, anything but using the term spy balloon. And then finally, here from the China Daily, it writes in another article, again, China Daily, a mouthpiece for Beijing, it writes that the whole affair is dirty tricks played by the U.S. media. The paper says that the U.S. has dramatized this into a Hollywood blockbuster where U.S. paranoia has made it, quote, overreact.
What about the American press? Slightly different from them, I suspect, Solange?
Yes, indeed. As the Wall Street Journal notes, this is not the first time that a Chinese espionage balloon has flown over the United States. During Trump's presidency, there were at least 3 incidents, but such incursions, according to U.S. officials, they were likely of shorter duration. Now, for the Washington Post, there is an element of farce, it says here, that one of the most dramatic incidents between these two superpowers actually involves a unmanned balloon, is quite farcical, it says. What information was actually garnered from the balloon remains unclear, but the paper says that it did create, quote, no shortage of hot air, namely from Republicans.
Very true. Let's turn now to the decision by the Iranian Supreme Leader. This is to pardon tens of thousands of prisoners.
Yeah, as Iran Daily notes, many of the pardoned are anti-government protesters, and the announcement's timing is important. It comes just before the 44th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, which is celebrated on February 11th. Meanwhile, the Lebanese paper L'Orient Le Jour says that many of the pardoned are many of these pardonings come as 2 former heads of government have spoken out about, quote, the need for political reform. And in this line of thought, the German paper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung says that this is a sign that Tehran is feeling fragile, that, quote, even circles loyal to the regime are calling for radical restructuring to, quote, save the Islamic Republic.
Iran, though, solidifying its ties to Russia?
Yeah, according to the Wall Street Journal, it's not this article, but according to the Wall Street Journal in another article, Tehran and Moscow are moving ahead with plans to build a new factory in Iran that could produce some 6,000 drones for Moscow to be used in Ukraine. Now, there's also another story in regard to Russia's relationships, and that comes from the Swiss paper Sonntag Zeitung. It says that it has actually accessed declassified archives archives providing that prove that the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, they prove that he was actually a spy. In the 1970s, he was, the paper says, a member of the KGB and a pal of Putin's. And the Parisian, Aujourd'hui en France, explains that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that Kirill had the codename Mikhailov, and that he was actually spying for the USSR, all the while living in Geneva and preaching harmony among Christians.
And finally, Solange, a story about how our sense of smell has evolved.
Slate tells us that our ancestors, the Neanderthals, well, they had similar senses of smells to ours, that we essentially have gotten the best from them. Scientists recreated our ancient cousins' odors, what they smelled in a lab, and they found that we took some of the best from both Neanderthals and Denisovans. As Insider tells us, from the Denisovans, we took things that smell sweet. The Denisovans are related to Homo sapiens. But what the other major mutation that we took is actually from the Neanderthals. And this mutation actually helped cancel out bad smells, bad odors, specifically our own body odor. And this mutation actually helped spare the Neanderthals from smelling their own bodies. It made them better hunters. And so therefore, we carry that sort of desensitization in our noses as well.
It is a little bit whiffy in here today, I have to say. Nothing to do with me and nothing to do with you as well, I'm sure. Solange Moujin with the papers for us here on France 24.